So, you take the Battle of Helm's Deep, sprinkle in a little bit of World War Z, some Top Gun, a little bit of The Last of Us, The Phantom Menace, bake it in the oven at about 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour and a half, and we have Game of Thrones, Season 8, Episode 3, The Long Night. Hello, boys and girls, by the way. I am Stones Malone here on behalf of themoviesleuth.com, and I am discussing, of course, one of the most hyped battles in TV history, and evidently one of the most divisive episodes in Game of Thrones, in recent memory for Game of Thrones. So yeah, I'm not going to waste a lot of time. There's a lot to say about this episode for me. So I think that I'll just come right out and say that this episode, for me to judge it properly, I think we have to actually finish the series, because to really critique it, I think you have to look at it a few different ways. The first viewing, watching it as it aired, is one thing. Upon subsequent viewings, after a little bit of the dust settles and you have some time to kind of reflect on what actually fucking happened, and then, of course, we're going to have to see how the story continues to play out. And I think only then can we really properly judge this episode as far as how it fits into the series. But I will say, as a standalone episode, as it aired, upon the first initial viewing, I thought it was 10 out of 10. It lived up to the hype. It hit every fucking beat that it needed to. I have never been more engaged mentally, emotionally, even physically in anything that I've ever watched on any screen as I was watching that episode. From the very beginning, I was as anxious as Sam was, and I thought the probably my favorite moments of the episode, even on subsequent viewings, is those first 15 minutes or so. I thought the tension was just perfectly built. The way the music was just dum dum dum, just everything, the anxiety, and the visuals. You know, what a fucking visual when Melisandre shows up and lights all the Araks, and we see the Dothraki charge headlong into the night. To see Ghost riding along or running alongside them was, that gave me an extra level of anxiety, because it's like, how the fuck are they going to survive this? Ghost is definitely a goner. And I have to say that was one little nitpick that I had, because I'm sitting there thinking to myself, all right, this is how they're going to eliminate the direwolves. They're just going to throw them away off screen or something real quick and meaningless. But evidently it turns out that wasn't the case, because I guess in the trailer for the next episode, we do see that he made it out alive somehow, miraculously. But anyway, getting off track here. Just to see that moment of that morale booster that Melisandre offered, I mean, we saw the Dothraki get all fucking riled up. We saw the smile on Ed's face, that look of kind of encouragement on Sansa and Arya, and everybody's spirits started to raise. As the viewer, my spirits were raised, and God damn it, we should have all known better, right? I should have. They go charging into the night, like I said, and each one of those lights, just the perspective from Dany and Jon, and then the perspective of everyone else on the front line, to see all of those flaming swords get snuffed out one by one until there was nothing left, and then just silence. That was A+, well done, fucking excellent cinematography, excellent direction. It was just across the board. That really, I thought, set the tone. Actually, what set the tone was when they first clashed with the Army of White, and you see that the first thing you see the swords light up is that giant, and then the look on the fucking face of, I don't know if it was the Khal or whoever it was, which of the Dothrakis finally caught sight of it, and it was just like, holy fuck, this is what we're up against, and oh my god. And then just to see what it was, just like a tidal wave of fucking whites. It just really made you feel like this, right out of the gate, this is an insurmountable event. There's no way that anybody is going to survive this. And then to see most of the characters that we actually care about, the Hound, Brienne, Jaime, Gendry, Podrick, all at the front lines. And just to think, I mean, and Brienne, I think, was the first one that I saw get swarmed, or it might have been the first one that they showed get fucking just dogpiled, and it's like, holy shit, is that it? Is she dead? And then of course Jaime with the last second save, and there was a lot of those. That was one nitpick I did have, was that there were a little too many of those, but we'll get into that later. The tension did ease up a little bit at times, which I thought was necessary because I was on the verge of a fucking panic attack. We needed those breaks to the crypts. We needed that break when they finally did light the fucking, what is it? The fucking barricades, whatever you want to call them. The name escapes me. The trenches. And we got those couple little lulls that I did feel were necessary. But it never slowed down for very long, and the tension just kept, everything, the anxiety just kept building and going, all the way up until the last second when Arya finally delivers the death blow to the Night King. So just on the whole, upon first viewing, I thought it was fucking incredible. Like I said, I was physically engaged, not only mentally and emotionally. I would catch myself like one ass cheek hanging off the couch, one arm behind my head in some weird position, jaw agape, standing up, fucking like, what the fuck? It was just crazy, man. It was the craziest episode of television I've ever seen in my life. And I think the closest I've ever come prior to that was probably in Breaking Bad when, Hank fucking got killed, the shootout scene in the desert. But that even pales in comparison to this. So, for that experience, that initial first watch, it was a 10 out of 10. Now, there have been a lot of complaints from a lot of people. I'm not going to cover too much of that. I will say that the biggest complaint that I've heard, one of the biggest complaints that I've heard leveled against the episode was that how dark it was, how impossible it was to see anything, to tell what the fuck was going on. Now, personally for me, I'll say a couple things to that. Number one, I think it's intentional. And I think the cinematographer, whatever the fuck his name is, and I haven't heard much from Miguel Sapochnik, the director, but it was intentional. It adds that sense of realism, okay? If you're in a battle in the middle of night and there's a snowstorm, you're not going to be able to tell exactly what the fuck's going on at any given moment. It adds to the anxiety, it adds to the tension, and I thought it worked. It also happened to work for me because I was prepared, okay? As I think most people should have been. Game of Thrones is always shot kind of in really low light, and I can tell you that as somebody who sits there and makes these videos, and I'll obviously a lot of times I put clips into my videos. And even the screenshots, I have to adjust the brightness on a lot of them, okay? So that the viewers of my videos can actually kind of make it. It's hard to make out, okay? So it was certainly something I was prepared for, and I had to make sure that the levels were all adjusted properly on my TV. The resolution was set just right, and for me, I watch it in my basement, okay? And I still have an old school 42-inch Panasonic plasma TV, so it worked out all right for me. I thought it was fine, but I understand the gripe. If you're sitting there trying to watch it in a somewhat lit room, and maybe you don't have the levels all adjusted correctly, you weren't prepared for it. I can see how that might have ruined the experience a little bit. But personally, for me, I thought the lighting was fine. So from there, allow me to briefly touch on some of the highlights of the episode, both positive and negative. First, let's talk about the deaths, okay? One of the things we were really anticipating in this episode is that we were going to lose a lot of the characters that we've grown to love over the last decade or so, right? We had a lot of moments last week that felt like characters saying goodbye. We had Jorah. With the moments that he had with Dany was clearly him saying goodbye. Brienne being knighted, fulfilling her arc, felt like it could have been a good send-off for her. Tormund, I mean, he didn't have like a big, character arc completion or anything like that, but, obviously he stole a lot of moments. I felt like that was indicative of somebody who might be going out. We were really led to believe that we were going to endure a lot more loss than we actually did. That's not to say that the deaths of characters like Theon and Jorah, both top tier characters, both characters that have been around since season 1, both that died like heroes' deaths. It's not to say that they weren't impactful, because they were, but they were also, those two deaths, both very, very predictable. It was each one of them was a character that had completed their arc, that died the way that they wanted to go out. As sad as it was to see Dany cradling Jorah as he tried to utter his last words and couldn't, as heartbreaking as that was for Dany, I wasn't so heartbroken for Jorah, and I certainly wasn't so heartbroken for Theon. Theon, look, after all he's been through, death is not even close to the most painful thing. Okay, so those were character arcs that were wrapped up in a nice, neat little bow. Okay, the other character deaths that we got were from second tier characters. Okay, as much as I love Lyanna Mormont, as much as she's a fan favorite, this little girl who's tough as nails and is heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking and crushing as it was to watch her be demolished by that fucking giant. You know, it's not one of our, like, it's not one of these characters that we've been following since the early seasons. But let me pause on her for a second, because I have to say, part of what made that so heartbreaking was, of course, it's a little girl. You know, she's tough as nails, and that's why we love her. But we love her because she's a little 10-year-old girl who is tough as nails. And we see the visual of a little 10-year-old girl whose teeth have been knocked out, who's bloodied and battered, charging hopelessly against an undead giant with nothing but a little axe, and then only to be picked up and every bone in her body crushed to dust. It made me sick, but at the same time, you know, the hero's death, right? She pulled out the dagger at the last second and wiped out the biggest player on the board at that moment. So, you know, there was a little bit of triumph in that terrible death. Ed, okay, yeah, he's somebody who's been around since the early days, but he's Ed, okay? He's not even Tormund. You know, and Beric, kind of the same thing. You know, he's a character who's been around a long time, but you know, he's already died 19 fucking times. You know, I mean, how many lives do you really get? He's got like fucking 10 more many than a fucking cat gets, and on top of that, it's like he fulfilled his purpose too, right? I mean, as kind of silly as I thought it kind of was ultimately, and we'll get into that in a little bit. Yeah, so I mean, we had characters like, we had the Hound, Gendry, Brienne, Jaime, Podrick, Tormund, all on the front line. Grey Worm, all on the front line when that tidal wave of fucking whites hit, and they all managed to survive to the very end. Just the logistics, the numbers, the odds. It's an absolute miracle that they all fucking survived. Sam, how can I forget Sam? You know, the least talented combatant on the field, and they managed to time and time again get swarmed, dogpiled, be put in peril, and only to be saved at the last second each and every single time. That's a major gripe that I have, because like I said, in the moment, as I was watching the episode live, it was like thrilling, right? And it was anxiety producing. But when you stop and think about it, and when you watch it, you know, second and third time, it's just like, wait a second, you know, I don't have a problem with plot armor, okay? But it doesn't need to be like the shiniest fucking plot armor that you've ever fucking seen. They don't need to make it so fucking glaring. There is a way that you can have those characters all survive to see another day without repeatedly putting them in like perilous situations over and over and over again and teasing us with their deaths. I feel like when all is said and done, I am glad on one hand that none of these characters died. Speaking of the characters, we can't forget Drogon, Rhaegal, Ghost. They all look to be alive and well, and they were all put in peril. So I'm glad they're all alive, because I like all of them, but at the same time, it's just like, well, we as the viewer don't really feel that same sense of loss that we felt during the Red Wedding, the same sense of loss we felt after Ned Stark was beheaded. There's nothing shocking. And to the larger point, I feel like this really makes it seem like the criticism that's been being leveled against Dan and Dave is kind of warranted. You know, the criticism that they have kind of lost their way after losing Martin's, you know, narrative. You know, they don't have, they're navigating the woods without a guide now, and it seems as though they've sacrificed a lot of that original grit and you know, whatever you want to call it, for like delivering the spectacle. And they did deliver the spectacle, don't get me wrong. I can say it 1,000 times till I'm blue in the face. I loved the episode. I loved the experience. There was nothing like it in my initial watch, but there's just some of these blunders that when you go back in hindsight, it's just like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Okay. And of course, I forgot to mention or focus on Melisandre, but you know, she served her purpose, right? Another one who had the little redemption arc, has nowhere really left to go. And you know, after all said and done, she takes off her magical choker and withers into dust. But you know, but speaking of Melisandre, that kind of leads me into another I guess, minor gripe. She shows up, which the scene she had lighting up all the Iraqs was excellent. The speech that she gave to Arya, that little moment that they shared where she reminds her of the conversation that they had back in season 2 or 3 or whatever the fuck it was about how she was going to close all these different colored eyes, including blue. As cool as all that was, ultimately, she didn't really accomplish anything a few oily rags and a motivational speaker couldn't have accomplished, okay? She lit the fucking swords, they got snuffed out immediately. She lit the fucking trenches, they got snuffed out immediately. I mean, and you didn't really need magic to do that, They could have just had a few barrels of oil and... Arya could have got a pep talk from someone else and went out and fucking go get him, Tiger, I mean, that's really all Melisandre did, as cool as it was visually and, as neat as it was, it highlights another logistical blunder or error, if you will. It just seems like there wasn't a lot of solid plan Bs by characters and heroes that should not be so stupid, right? The whole plan to set up the dragons and sit there and wait for the Night King to arrive. It's like, well, there's 2 of you, right? There's one Night King, there's 2 of you. Why don't one of you go and just start torching the fucking lines of the fucking whites before the Dothraki fucking charge to their fucking imminent death, right? It seems like that might have made a little bit of sense. We were talking about the crypts. The crypts are the safest place. The crypts are the safest place. And we all knew good goddamn well that they were not entirely safe, right? So you don't even have an Ilyn Payne down there. You don't even have, look, I complained about Ghost being kind of wasted in this episode and potentially killed off screen. That was my biggest fear. How about this? You put a few fucking soldiers, maybe, the Ironborn are protecting Bran, and get a few ragtaggers to fucking defend the crypts. Just a few. You can spare a few. Get Ghost down there, okay? You have to suspect that something could happen down there. And then we could have had a nice little moment with Ghost where he saves someone's fucking ass, right? So that was kind of a fuck up in my eyes. So stuff like that. I'm not like a military strategist. I'm not going to nitpick too much on the battle strategy on the whole, but there were just certain things that were just that stood out to me. Another thing that stood out to me was we had the little Assassin's Creed / The Last of Us moment with Arya in the library, which was a very tense scene. I really did enjoy it. However, it's a little silly that the fucking whites can hear a few drops of blood hitting the floor, yet the largest battle in the history of the fucking world is happening right outside those fucking windows, right? And it's nothing but utter silence. We, the viewer, hear nothing. I want to know what fucking kind of soundproofing they have over in Westeros, because whatever it is, I need to get some of it here for my little fucking quote-unquote studio that I do these fucking things in. Maybe it'll fucking improve the quality of the audio that I have. But yeah, so that was awfully convenient, but I understand why the show did it. It's one of those things where it's about the narrative. It's not about the narrative. It's about, it's about the viewer's experience. So I can let it slide. But anyway, so those are some of the gripes that I have. But of course, the biggest, the chief among them, the biggest gripe is that the White Walkers, we got no more backstory. There's nothing more to them than it's bad Mr. Frosty and Craster's bastards, and they want to kill everyone and everything. They just want to wipe out all people. There's no deeper purpose. If there was, we never got it. Okay, they're just basically they have been treated now as the mini bosses throughout the entirety of the series, from season 1, episode 1, all the way up to now. The White Walkers have been teased and as this mysterious force that's looming in the background. The true threat is the one that lies to the north. The war of the fucking for the throne means absolutely jack shit. It's this that you really have to worry about. This is the real threat. And then the real threat is just simply some fucking basically robots, right? The children of the forest programmed these creatures to just kill all men. And it's as simple as that. And Bran laid it out last week. I thought he was missing something. I thought there has to be something more to the White Walkers than just, we want to kill everyone. Okay? Because in the books, they're described as having a culture, their own language. There's so much more mystery to them. I just feel like we're missing something here, right? And why? I mean, we get that again, going back to the very first episode, the very first season, we got the 3 Night's Watchmen that travel north of the wall to do some ranging, and they sacrifice, or they spare, I should say, the one, right? They behead the fucking two guys, Waymar Royce and then the bearded dude. They lop the bearded dude's head off and then fucking toss it to the kid's lap and go forth and tell your people what we have done here, or something like that, right? You know, of course they don't fucking say it, but that's what they're fucking saying. They're delivering a message. They do these intricate designs made out of body parts, and of course they're mimicking the children's designs. There just seems like there has to be something more. There's something that feels empty. Okay, I don't have a problem. One thing I don't have a problem with is that it was Arya that fucking took out the Night King. I thought that was excellent. I thought it was excellently. I liked the subversion. I liked the fact that they didn't go with the Luke Skywalker versus Darth Vader moment. I liked that it was Arya that put an end to it all. That's fine. Even the fucking, speaking of Star Wars, the Phantom Menace way in which the fucking whole army collapsed after the leader was taken out, that's fine too. I'm okay with that. I just wanted something more before it happened. I will say that I'm glad he didn't fly south to King's Landing. A lot of people were predicting that. The Night King's not even going to be at Winterfell. He's going to fly south to King's Landing. He's going to turn the Golden Company into a bunch of whites, and he's going to march that army north so the fucking our heroes won't be able to escape. And then it's just like, well, that's wiping Cersei out of the fucking equation, and that's not going to fucking happen. That was never going to happen. I never subscribed to that theory, and I am glad they didn't do that because I thought that would have been fucking stupid. Because then instead of the Night King and the White Walkers being fucking, retroactively fucking ruined, it would have been Cersei, and it's just like, really? That's it? So I don't know. Like I said, I wish they would have added a couple episodes onto the end of the season, made this battle a little bit longer, give us a little more backstory into the Night King. It should have been more interesting than it was. I felt like just the motivation of the White Walkers is now just fucking ruined. It's just fucking dumb. It's boring, right? And I don't imagine, I can't square it with Martin's writing. I can't imagine that in Martin's mind, the future that he has planned for them in the books will be reflective of that. I have to imagine there's something more to it. But I guess that's about it. That's all that's coming to mind. I'm going to try to get out another video before Sunday, talking about what I think might come for episode 4. I also want to shit on the Sonic trailer that just came out today a little bit, so I'm going to try to maybe get that out there. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me know in your comments below. Follow us at themoviesleuth.com, Facebook, Twitter, all that jazz. And I will look forward to seeing you in a few days, I guess. I don't know.